Hi everybody! Today's video is going to be on how to make goddess beads. I am going to make two beads in this video, one with a vertical hole going from top to bottom of the goddess and one with a horizontal hole along the shoulder area. And this was a special request from Kathleen, so I hope you enjoy. So I have my mandrel all preheated and I am using ivory for my goddesses today. And what I'm doing here is I am just establishing the footprint of the size of the bead I want. Now the footprint is the actual glass that gets attached to the mandrel, and you want this to be just slightly smaller than your finished bead because you want your bead ends to be nice and dimpled, and so you kind of roll out the glass a little further than where it's actually attached by your footprint. And so I added a little extra glass on either end of this bead, and I am going to establish the bottom side first. This is going to be where her legs are. They're kind of like thighs. I go down so I don't put legs and I don't put arms or heads on my goddesses. You can of course do that if you want, but this is just a basic torso bead, and I am using ivory in my goddesses here. And if you've done glass in any form, you know that the ivory is like the softest glass out there according to to colors. It's one of the softest. So if you really have a problem controlling your glass, I wouldn't start with ivory. Transparent glasses are stiffer than the opaque glasses. So if you want to try your first goddess or two doing it with a transparent, you might have a little more control over the heat and how the glass moves. So just an FYI there. So you don't have to use ivory. I just traditionally use ivory for my goddesses for the most part. I do have other color goddesses, but I don't know. Ivory just seems like the natural, color to use when I make these. But of course, you don't have to do it with this color. So now I just added a little more glass. I added a little more around the center for the hips and around the top for the shoulders. And I will of course be adding more glass to this. I'm just trying to get a basic shape down. So I'm just just trying to get it a little bit started. And I will actually flatten this a little bit after I get the shoulder and the hip part put on. And of course you don't have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to flatten this. You can make skinny goddesses, you can make really fat goddesses, you can make like Buddha beads. It's all up to you of how you want to shape these. This is just kind of like the standard shape that I have done in the past. So this is all I'm showing here, but of course you can make it whatever shape you want with your final bead. So it's all up to you. It's all your imagination. So here I'm flattening it a little bit. See that? So I flattened it and now it looks more like the hourglass shape. And so it's just the basic shape for now. And I am going to, I'm just trying to even this out because it wasn't like on a nice angle down from the legs up to the hips. So I was just giving it a little flattening there. And this video is actually real time. It is not slowed down. I will slow down a little bit at the end. And so now I'm putting on 2 little dollops of glass for the little butt. And this is kind of a smaller bead, so it's not really huge. So I don't need a lot of glass there. And when I heat in those dots, I want to heat mostly from the top where the dots merge with the back. So then it kind of flows in, and so it looks more natural, like a regular butt. So you want to have the glass just flow in and then have the little cheeks kind of hanging down from that. So you want it kind of all to merge together at the top there, and look natural. And so now I'm just creasing and trying to get those little butt cheeks even and about the same height. And I will melt it, one side or another. I'll hold it up and look at it. And I'm trying to get them, see, I curve it around. I use my X-Acto. You can use whatever tool you want. And I curve it around to one side or another. And then I put a little dent in for the spine area, just to like define her back. And so I basically have a butt there. And now I'm going to crease, or I put the belly button in. You don't have to do the belly button now. You could do that later. But then I crease the little leg section. So you can have them going straight up, your legs going straight up evenly. You can have them on an angle. It all depends on how you want to define the leg. And it's just a tiny, tiny crease. It's not much. You don't want to cut all the way down to the mandrel or anything. And now I'm heating like those butt cheeks around the side of the hips a little bit, like how a butt naturally kind of wraps around a little bit and gets a little wide on the sides. So I'm just defining those cheeks a little bit more. And now I'm going to add some shoulder glass. So I want my goddess to have a little definition of shoulder. I don't really make arms or anything, but I want a little shoulder area just to define that this is actually a body and a woman. And so I just indent a little bit with my tool there to make like a little armpit indentation. You don't have to do this. It just adds a little more detail to it. And it helps lift up, the arm glass a little bit too. And so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and try to get them even. They don't have to be even. You can have like one shoulder or arm going upward and one downward. So you can position them different ways to make them look like your torso is in a different position. So it doesn't always have to be, perfectly symmetrical. So it's all how you want it to look in the end. So I'm just going to put another little armpit dent in that one too. And just curving up that glass right there that meets with the beginning of the shoulder. And so there's her arms, or beginning of her arms, her shoulders. And then I'm going to put on her chest area. And so this is very similar to putting on the butt. I add 2 dots of glass, and I usually start them up high, a little bit higher than where I want them to end up, hanging down. And I heat from the top of them. So like the very top of the chest area, and let them meld and flow down like natural breasts. And so I will do that. One needed a little more glass because they weren't that even. And one is hanging down more, as you see there. So I am going to support that up. And I curve it around up towards the armpit. So you curve it around and up towards that armpit. So it makes it look more like a natural breast. And I defined the center because they kind of melded like I said, the ivory's really soft. And so the breasts kind of melded together a little bit. And so I redefined the separation there. And I'm going to define this one. It's still hanging down a little too low. And so I'm just going around and trying to, sorry, I go kind of off the screen there. But I'm going around and trying to define the 2 breast sizes and trying to get them even. And then I'm going to put little indents, which I have a hard time because I wasn't getting the glass soft enough, but little indents for a collarbone. This is also something you really don't have to add, but it just adds a little more definition, a little more texture to your bead. And so I'm just putting 2 little indents for the collarbone. And so there's the basic body. Now all I need are the little nippies. And so you just add 2 little teeny pieces of glass, very tiny. Make them kind of perky. And just pull it out to sharp point and barely heat it because the ivory is really soft. You barely heat it. And here is that finished goddess bead. So there is that little one. And you can add decoration to those 2. I just left that one plain. And this is the second one that I'm making. And this one is a little bit larger. I'm doing it horizontally, so basically the glass I'm laying on right here is the shoulder glass, the top and the shoulder glass for this goddess. And I will add glass to actually have her body hanging down from this section. So this one takes a little bit longer. Number 1, because it's bigger, and number 2, because I just have to add all that hanging glass on there. And I do speed up this video a little bit when I'm adding all that glass. Right now it's real time. And so this is all in real time that I'm doing it. And what I'm doing here is I'm kind of making like an opposite bicone. I'm actually having it skinnier in the center and having it flare out wider on the outer edges. And that kind of defines like where the breastbone comes down, you know, where your neck bones come down there, and your collarbone comes down to where it raises up for your shoulders a little bit. And so that's what this design is for. And so it's just a little bit indented in the center. And then I'm going to add a little bit more glass to either side to add a little more shoulder glass to define a little bit of a shoulder there on either side. And after that, now I have the video sped up, I am just going to add, you know, a bunch of glass and glass to get these, to get the body added. And so I'm kind of melting in those shoulders there a little bit and having them fall downward. Like you could see, I'm holding the mandrel down on an angle so that that top glass for the shoulder will fall down in an outward direction to make it represent a shoulder there. And so now I'm just adding more glass here. And I'm going to add as much glass that I think I need to make a nice size body for the shoulders that I created. So whatever shoulders you create, you know, the body needs to conform with it so that it doesn't look out of proportion. And so I'm just adding a bunch of glass here and trying to get all the glass I need for the body section. And whatever way you want to add this on, if you want to add it on with big dollops of glass, or do like I'm doing, I'm kind of just, you know, swiping it on around, melting it down, and then melting the whole mass in. So however you want to add that glass, it doesn't matter. Adding a little more shoulder glass there and using my tool to help flare it out a little bit too. So you could do that. And so I'm just adding and adding. And even more shoulder glass. I wasn't happy with my shoulders. I needed some nice defined shoulder there. But I'm adding more body glass. And so you want to make sure you have enough, and you want to make sure your taper down from the shoulders is smooth. You want a nice smooth graduation from that top width down to your waist. Of course, if you want a chunky goddess, it would be a little bigger, a little rounder. So it's however you want to make these, the shape of these. And so I'm getting down to where I have the body part, the body mass, at least to about the waist. And so I'm adding a little more, and this is going to be the hip section right here. And I kind of want to let this ball up a little bit. So I'm going to, you know, flatten it down a little and kind of let it thicken up to make like the hip section. And I'm flattening that back, and now I'm back in real time. And I'm just defining that little spine like I did on the last bead, putting a little line for to represent a spine, and I'm putting little creases in for the collarbone. It was probably too much of a V shape. It should have probably been more of a wider angle, but that's okay. They will semi-melt in as I'm working the rest of the bead, so we're good with that. And so I'm going to add even more glass because I don't think my hips are quite wide enough. And so I'm going to add even more. And add a little more glass around the circumference there. So it's however you want to get the look you want, basically. It's up to you. And there I'm defining the belly button. I didn't have to actually put the belly button hole in yet, but I did it just so that I had a reference point of where my hips were going to be compared to the rest of the bead. I wanted to make sure I kept that that length for the torso. And so that's why I put it there. But you don't have to put it there yet. You could have done it later. And so I smushed that flat a little bit to widen it even more. And now I'm going to add some leg glass. So I do have some little butt glass already on this bead. So a lot of times I don't have that extra glass sticking out of the back that you see there. But in this case I did. So I'm just going to manipulate that glass and only add a little bit for the butt. So I will squish this down. But normally it won't be so sticking out. It'll be flatter. And so I will add more glass for the butt cheeks. But I did have a lot of glass already here. So I'm just going to define the legs once I get going here. So I'm going to define the legs here. See, look at all that glass there. So I'm going to crease the legs, and then I'm going to push up a little bit for the butt, and just trying to make an initial definition of it. And I will straighten out those legs, flatten them up a little bit, even though, you know, the legs aren't totally flat. But I will see, I'll smooth them down a little bit. And separate that butt section. And now I will just add, I don't need as much, I'll just add a little extra glass to define the rest of the butt. And my legs are starting to angle forward a little bit, as you can see. It's like her knees are raised up or something. And I'm gonna straighten that out a little bit. So that's okay if that happens. This glass is really soft though, so it's a lot easier to do things like that and have it move that way. But I will straighten it out, so don't worry about that. And I am just defining the butt, and I'm heating like at the top where it melds with the back. You want it to smoothly transition into the butt section from the back. And so I'm going to heat that right where the butt and the back hit, and so that butt glass can flow downward. See that? It flows downward into a normal, realistic looking butt. And then I'm going to heat each side and have those cheeks kind of move around to the hip section a little bit. And I pretty much have a butt there. I'm just going to redefine the crease, not all the way up, only halfway up. And I have pretty much a nice butt there. And so I'm heating the front of the torso. I'm redefining that belly button again. And now I'm mushing those legs down again, so they're not sticking out so far. So I'm heating that whole section so it'll kind of move downward. And now I'm going to heat and crease the front of the legs. And here my tool got too hot. I should have cooled it off. I didn't cool it off in the water. So now I did. But there we go. I'm redefining it. And now I'm like just closing up those thighs a little bit, so it goes more to like a point at the bottom, creasing the top of the leg area, and I have a basic goddess shape there. And so now all I need to do is the breasts. That's the only part I need to finish up here. I'm reheating that leg there because it wasn't quite smooth. But so I just put the breasts on. And on this one, I actually put a little bit of decoration. I put a little flower down the side of the leg, which I do on a lot of my goddess beads. But you can actually add decoration all over her body. You could put dots or flowers or, you know, whatever you want on it. Or just leave it plain. Or like I said, you can do these in different colors. So you can have a variety of colored beads like this. And so I'm doing the same thing. I'm heating the top, and I'm holding it down so the glass will flatten down towards the body. I'm holding it vertically. So I'm heating the top section and then holding it upright so the glass will flow down towards the rest of the body. But heating also at the top of the chest, I'm pushing it a little bit with my tool. So if your breasts don't seem to be melting in at the top enough, you can also help it along with a tool. And now I'm moving that outwards towards the armpit a little bit, moving it in that direction so it looks more like a natural breast. And so I do a lot of gravity work. So I move it, you know, back and forth around. And I push the side of the breast a little bit up towards that armpit. And I'm defining the little armpit mark, just like on the other goddess bead. And doing the same on the other side. Getting a little definition in the armpit. And now I'm just going to define these. Well, I guess I didn't have to do so much with the breasts. I guess they came out pretty well. So now I'm just going to add the little nippies. And so just 2 little dots, very tiny, and barely put them in the flame because you don't want them to melt down. You don't want them to melt back in. Just enough to be there on the surface. And so there's the basic goddess bead. And now I'm going to add just a little blue flower to the side of her hip, her one hip. And sorry about this, but my hand kind of gets in the way a little bit. I'm a lefty, so sometimes I get in the way of myself. But I'm just adding like little swipes for petals. And I'm doing 5. I'm doing 5 petals for the flower, right next to each other, gradually getting shorter petals towards the outside. And then I'm just adding 3 more swipes along the top in between the other petals, just to add a little more bulk to that flower. So it's raised up a little more off of her hip there. And then I'm just going to add a little green. I think this is just a plain green stringer. It's not striped or anything. Just a little green stringer to act like a stem and a couple of little leaves there. So there's one leaf and there's another leaf. And now I'm just going to pull off, there's a little too much glass there. And so I'm just going to pull off the excess glass there until I'm happy with it. And then I want to make sure I meld that all in so that it's melded in enough. I mean, not totally flat, it's raised, but you want to make sure there's no undercuts with your stem or your flower. You want to make sure that it's melded in enough so that it's not going to pop off later. So you want to make sure you have a nice attachment there. So I'm trying to help a little bit with my tool to flatten it. Pulling it out a little bit more to a point. And I think we're basically done. And so there's that goddess bead. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching.